You're listening to Veg Your Best. There has never been a more important time to be vegan. At Veg Your Best, we're here to help you limit and eliminate the consumption of animal products without feeling deprived, overwhelmed, or unsupported, even if no one you know is vegan. My name's Michelle Olander. I'm a life coach, and I want to show you that living vegan is so possible, and it will unlock the possibilities you see and give you the confidence to take on your next goal by doing it your way. If I could go vegan in 2015, back then with all my excuses, I know that you can start moving in a vegan direction too. Veg your best, and there's nothing you can't do. Episode 119, Vegan Adventure Athlete, Bicycle Brendan Walsh. Welcome everyone to Veg Your Best. Or maybe it's welcome back. You know, the theme of adventure has been coming up for me and around my clients really a lot lately, quite a bit. Adventure. And geek alert, this will only take a couple seconds, but geek alert, adventure comes from the Latin root advenire, the verb to arrive. Adventure implies that there will be some sort of arrival. If you've ever heard of the concept of the hero's journey in literature and in myths, one of the first stages of the hero's journey is that call to adventure. Some inciting incident, maybe a tragedy or an event outside of their control, pushes the hero out of their ordinary world, out of their comfort zone. And now they've got a mission, and that involves arrival in a different place. And the Christmas season is often referred to as Advent. Maybe some of you have had an Advent calendar growing up. Advent, it's from the same root, arrival. And in the Christian tradition, the arrival is of what Christians believe is the Messiah. But arrival and adventure, they are part of our human mythos. It is part of our human and cultural narrative, certainly not limited to any religious tradition. In all times and cultures, humans appear to have been drawn to stories of adventure, of endurance, and arrival at goals. Today's guest is adventure athlete Brendan Walsh. Bicycle Brendan to his many followers, and you're going to hear today how Brendan's own call to adventure came after a car accident and how it gradually changed him and his ideas about what was possible for him in this life and informed his book titled For Those Who Can't. Now, I don't want to spoil any of it, but I hope that you'll keep a tiny part of your brain and soul open as you're listening to Brendan for what adventure is next for you. As always, Bicycle Brendan Walsh's contact links will be in the show notes, so you can just listen, and I will catch you on the other side of the interview. Bicycle Brendan Walsh, welcome to Veg Your Best.
Awesome. Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for having me on today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Ever since I started to learn about you, I was like, oh, I hope he'd come on the pod. I mean, I know most of my listeners tend to be women more like my age and in a different part of life. But I think you are a phenomenon, and I just thought everybody should know about you if they don't.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your kind words. I super appreciate that.
Oh, it's great. It's great to have you. So I hear you called Bicycle Brendan all the time. So where did that come from, Brendan?
That moniker kind of came around when I rode my bike across the country for the very first time. It was 2017. I was riding from Boston to St. Jude's, Boston to Seattle for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, and that's kind of when the name came to be.
And was that your first time riding as a fundraiser or doing something kind of one of your adventure athletic events as a fundraiser?
Yeah, definitely. That was kind of like what started it all was,
Mm.
and not only was it my first big adventure, first fundraiser, all that, like I had literally never even done an overnight on a bike before.
Oh, so how many overnights did that entail then?
That was a like 4,000 mile journey that took me about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah, just completely on a whim.
A whim.
Completely, I just strapped a tent, a guitar to my bike and headed west with literally no plan at all, except for I'm gonna make it to Seattle.
So were other people doing this adventure? It was just you yourself looked for sponsors and people to donate?
Yeah, so it was a lot more grassroots. Like, my grandmother passed away from melanoma. I think like a year before, give or take, like a couple months, like, and I really wanted to do something to honor her and bring awareness to it. And, I was thinking about what causes would be a great thing to represent and bring awareness to. And I just thought about, kids with cancer, and like, there's literally not a sadder concept than that. It's like the saddest thing I could possibly ever think of, is like my grandmother, she got to live a long, full life, and these kids are super optimistic and really hopeful, in the face of much, much adversity. So yeah, no, I just set off and kind of put it out there on the internet and did a couple of interviews, like randomly bumped into like a writer in Ohio and kind of just slowly got the word out there more and more and more, and was able to raise a little over $4,000 on that very first adventure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and then you got the bug.
Totally. Yeah. I'll never forget. I was I was working at a school. I was working in AV manager at the school for like years. And, I kind of took like a sabbatical, quote unquote. I was really like gonna quit. And they were like, "Do you want a job when you come back?" And I was like, "Oh, I need one." And I never forget this woman I worked with. I stay in touch with her to this day, but she was like, this is awesome, but like, what's going to happen, when you want to do it again? And I was like, I won't want to do it again. And then, here we are 5 years later of doing bigger and bigger and more, and what's next, and how could I, and just problem solving these big wild adventures.
Well, it is amazing. I'm going to do a little bit of a mea culpa here. I tried to like bone up on the different adventures you've done, the routes, the length, the mileage. what were the spectacular statistics about them? I just couldn't. I honestly, I was my eyes were rolling in the back of my head. I could not believe what you've done.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I'm a big believer that like we all could do these things
Mm-hmm.
if we just truly put all of ourselves into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the system that like you're only going to get as far as you believe you can get. And it really, after that cross country ride, really spurred that whole ideology for me because, like I said, I'd never done even a single overnight before. I'd ridden my bike 100 miles one time. That was like my big bike physical accomplishment before this. And then, this was that times like 40, you know what I mean? Plus some more. Like it was a journey. And, I did that and I never gave up, even though there was like a ton of reasons why I should have, especially in the beginning when I was close to home. It snowed the day I left, you know? So all of these things kept adding up to be like, oh, well, maybe, next year and blah, 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 but instead I just chose to not quit,
Mm.
and it really just opened up my mind to say like, why can't I do that? Other people do all these amazing things. Why couldn't I do that? If I just follow in their footsteps and learn as much as I can and eat a plant-based diet and put in all the work, all of these pieces add up, and it's really just builds and builds and builds on the thought that, you can really do anything you really set your mind to, and you're really going to work like logically towards.
So not quitting is kind of the key. You
Yeah.
you might have to do a U-turn, and you might have to pull over, and you might have to nurse a sore toe or something, but not quitting. Did you have some on that first ride? Did you have some times you had to pull over and spend some time nursing a sore anything?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean that was a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, like somehow sprained an ankle. I actually got like the bird flu. I got
Mm.
hiptoplasmosis. So I was pretty much spending zero money to sleep every night. I would just sleep in parks and on the side of the road, and like people who would invite me into their house. Because like I still am, do it on a pretty shoestring budget. So I ended up sleeping in this pavilion, this like three-walled pavilion, middle of North Dakota, and it was just filled with birds and bird matter, dead baby birds and like bird shit, and it was all swirling around. I must have inhaled so much of it that I got like the bird flu. So I
Oh
was
my
I was
goodness.
stuck in a Red Roof Inn in Dickinson, North Dakota, just squeezed out like a rag for like 3 days straight. I lost so much weight, and then continued like the second half of the journey, really how it felt like, even though it was like already 2,500 miles. I got bronchitis. I actually forgot about this until just now. I got bronchitis, so I'm riding my bike 60 plus miles a day, into the wind across North Dakota, Montana, fully loaded, so I'm like riding sails against the wind. And with bronchitis, and I ended up getting an inhaler, like staying with some random doctor. It was like pretty much the definition of serendipity. But like, and then this then this like steroid inhaler gave me seizures. So I was like, the hits just kept coming, really. And they always do on these big adventures.
Other than that, it was fun.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like it's the kind of fun too where, like, you go out in the cold and you're out there for hours and you're snowshoeing, you're fapping, whatever, whatever, whatever. And it's not really fun then, but then when you get home and you tell the stories later, that's when they're really fun. So
Yeah. Well, I'm going to trust you on that one because I can barely get into a cold a cold swimming pool.
yeah.
Yeah, discomfort's not my middle name, but I think that's amazing. Now you mentioned along the way that the things you do, and one of them is a plant-based diet, and that is one of the main reasons why I came across your name, because you are an adventure athlete, an endurance athlete, and you run on plants.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that started on that adventure. I've always loved music, and I had, some really great heroes and idols, if you will, growing up. And I was vegetarian for like a little bit in high school, um, and continued to not eat pork or anything. But up until that, like when I rode across the country, like I was on a seafood diet, which was like if I saw food, I ate it. And really, what I was trying to say is I was just trying to say yes to everything, and I actually met my first vegans ever on that trip, and they stayed in that pavilion with me. They also like, and I never heard from them again. So, hopefully they're well. Hopefully they fare better than I did that next day. But, it was when I got to Eastern Washington where I had this big epiphany. So I don't know if you've ever been out there, but it's like a high desert. And I ended up staying with this family who owned this farm, and it was wild. Like I got there and there was like peacocks and emus and quail and all these kind of geese. And like, it was just a big, diverse farm. And, it was an amazing stay, beautiful family, really like just gave and gave and gave. Like this is the kind of people that they are, and that's why they're so filled with joy. But right before I leave, a neighbor comes by with an emaciated baby deer. Because when a mother leaves her fawn, they just kind of like tuck them under a bush or something and be like, "Yo, I'm going to come back for you." And either someone killed the mom, via hunting or with their car on accident, and never came back. So I literally bottle fed a baby deer on my lap to try to nurse it back to health in this moment. And a deer is something we see in such a fleeting moment. Like typically we see just the back, the little white tuft of their tails, right? Zipping off in the woods. And I had this 6 inch soul to soul gaze between our eyes. And, that really, really stuck with me afterwards.
Mm.
Unfortunately, like right before I left, it was just like too much. And it passed away and its body shut down. But, that even deeply sowed these seeds into my soul, and right when I came back, I started doing more and more and more and more research on like plant-based diets and recovery and everything, like both in tune with my body and sports and physical progression, but also, ethics and morals and spirituality of like, why do we even do these things? We don't really need to, and then ended up going vegan at the end of that year. So really all my big adventures, all my big like athletic accomplishments, quote unquote, if you will, have really all been done on a vegan diet since then.
That's really remarkable. When I was first, maybe 7, 8 years ago, maybe a little longer, it was before I committed to a vegan practice. I followed a lot of endurance athletes that were vegan, and they were mostly men. They were mostly, probably a little younger than I was, but middle aged. And I remember thinking, okay, if they can do that, I probably won't die. I probably won't die gardening.
Yeah.
So I think it's most of the people who listen to me are women, middle aged. Some other, that's not all that listens, but a lot of us are middle aged women who resonate with the idea of veganism or resonate with the idea of a plant based diet, but we just think it must be impossible. How could it be? How could it be possible? And it's, I think, very inspiring to hear someone like yourself making it work with these sorts of athletic feats. So tell me, one of the ones that I thought was remarkable, and was that this year? Last year was the New England highest points.
Yeah.
The NE6, NE5.
Yeah, the NE6.
NE6.
Yeah.
Tell me about that one.
Yeah, that was a wild adventure where, I came up with the idea where I was like, I want to run the highest point in each state of New England. And then I was like, well, that doesn't really sound that hard. So what if I ride my bike in between them? And I was like, oh, that's an idea. So what I cooked up was starting at Katahdin in Maine in Baxter. I ran up Katahdin and then I rode my bike 225 miles to Mount Washington, where I ran up Mount Washington and then I rode my bike to Mount Mansfield. So it was the highest point in each state of New England while cycling in between them. So a completely, carbon-free journey, other than like the process of the food that was made, obviously, through. Um, but yeah, like no carbon emissions. And through that, we were able to raise like $3,600 for the Alzheimer's Association through doing that. And, I did that to honor my Aunt Susan and my two cousins, Bridget and Meryl, who were her caretakers during the time period.
That's beautiful. So and that also, you did a grassroots type of fundraiser in that respect too.
Totally.
Okay. So, and how do people learn when you're doing these events?
Yeah, so a lot of it, as I've gone on, I think now people just like know I'm going to do it. Like when I'll never forget when I first told my friends, like, this was like a different time, like sitting around the campfire drinking beers kind of time. Like this was like a long time ago. And I was like, I think I'm going to ride my bike across the country. And they were like, and then, flash forward 5 years later. And now I'm like, yo, I think I'm going to do this. And they're like, okay, blah, blah, blah. This whole big like run of believing it. And I think now it's like, a lot of it is, I feel really fortunate to have slowly gained some sponsors who align with my morals and values. Like, when I go off and do these things, I'll have Kalkia, who's one of my sponsors. They make awesome, awesome bags. Like they started with ski stuff. Now they just opened up their own bike line, all this kind of, great energy that they're putting out into the outdoor space too, because it's not just like let's make this bag and let's make money. It's like they have Kolkia Earth where they're recyclable water bottles and it's like sustainably sourced and all this stuff. And I'm really lucky that they do PR and they'll like share press release and stuff for my adventures right before I take off. But, I also do like a good portion, if not all of this, completely on my own. So like contacting people and just really just constant networking. And, like I'm literally doing interviews. Like when I did the 10K, the Guinness World Record, like I was doing interviews while riding my bike 200 miles a day.
So let's not skip over the Guinness World Record that you already have achieved. So how was that? Where was that?
That was that journey was in 2019, so 2 years before the NE6 we were just talking about. That was last year. That was the fastest time to cycle across the United States from north to south. So that was a big project called the 10K for NAMI, which I set off to raise $10,000 and awareness for the National Alliance on Mental Illness.
NAMI, NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental.
Yep, National Alliance on Mental Illness. They're one of the nation's leading grassroots mental health organizations, and I learned a lot before even doing this through NAMI. And, I've dealt with mental health issues my entire life. And, starting at 18, I lost 3 friends to mental illness from 18 to 22, 2 a suicide and 1 of a drug overdose. And this was really my way to bring light to this. The number one demographic of people who commit suicide are actually young men. And I wanted to do this and, bring awareness to this, as much money, but bring awareness to this cause for the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And that was part 1 of the fundraiser, was that Guinness World Record. So through that, we raised a little under 6,200. But, I'm a man of my word. So I said I was going to raise $10,000. So what I did the following year in 2020 was I ran 100 miles across the entirety of Cape Cod. So from P-Town all the way down to Woods Hole in 22 hours to raise the remaining $3,900 for the National Alliance of Mental Illness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's really amazing. Now, how do you come up with the feats, the routes? Do they just come to you? Do you look at them at an atlas and go, that sounds hard? That sounds awful. I'm in.
Well, I love maps. Like I love maps. And I also love adventure, and I like to think I'm like kind of a student of all of it, like I really respect everybody who's ever done anything for me, and I try to learn from them and, kind of look at it like you're standing on the shoulders of giants. That's really how I look at, the concept of venturing. But, I'll look at a map and really I call everything I do art ventures, because I was a musician. I still am, but like I'm not like a professional musician anymore. So this is kind of like a big way to express myself. It's not just like this big physical endeavor and, it's all that. Like it's a concept, that turns into so much more than it originally was. So, I can look at a map and just dream up a million different things just by staring at the spaces in between.
Wow. So that actually makes more sense to me now, that it is a piece of conceptual art, what you are creating, because it must require all kinds of time and all kinds of planning. And it's not just, maybe the bike ride that you just set out, or did you have a fully fleshed out route for the first bike ride?
No,
that's what I got the impression.
No, I had maps. Like I would get to the next state.
Yeah.
And go to the very first gas station. And this was like 2017, so you could still do this. Like, I don't even know if they sell maps in gas stations anymore. But like, I would have to go to the corner where they tucked it away and buy like the New York State map and the Ohio map. And like, literally, I'd buy the map of the state I just got into. And I navigated across the country with maps for that. So no, I had no idea what I was doing.
But now you've got plans. Now, when you do them now. Okay.
Yeah. I definitely have a little bit more refined plans, because, a lot of it too is pushing the boundaries of not only of what I have done before, but what people think is possible. And like, these creative, you're talking about art, as a concept, and that really how it is, pushing the boundaries of thought and possibility. And, you know, uh, a lot of that requires a little more finer planning at times, like for the NE6, it was a lot of, because I'm generally out there completely self-supported, so I'm carrying and getting all my own food and water and doing everything on my own. So like that in itself adds all these complications. So you try to plan a little bit better and you do the route and, you have that, but you really can't be too stuck in on anything
Mm.
because crazy shit's going to happen and you're just going to have to deal with it. So you try to like set some parameters, but also just know that sometimes you're going to have to color outside the lines.
So, you talked about the NE6. I know as a kid, my dad literally dragged us up mountains. We've been up Katahdin, we've been up Mount Washington, and I remember on Mount Washington, I actually can visualize the stones. People do die occasionally when there's a freak snowstorm, or they are in themselves have some sort of a health emergency on the trail, and there's not really too much to be done about it in large parts of it. So, did you run into any kind of crazy weather on some of these the mountains?
Oh yeah, totally. Like it was I mean, I'm also like unlucky to it's a bit of a stats thing too, where like the longer you're in an environment, the more likely something is to have happened, so I was absolutely boogieing through these things. Like we did Katahdin in like under 4 hours, and we did Washington in like under 4.5 hours. But like that doesn't mean like it started to hail at the top when we got to on the top of Mount Washington, and we're like, we got to get below tree line, because it's not only you're just about time and everything, because you know everything I do is pretty much like time based. Like the NE6, I said 6 days, but I did it in 4.5. So I'm like trying to like absolutely gas it the whole time, So that involves getting down safely, and you really have to respect Mother Nature, because if she really truly didn't want me to pass, then, all of my nightmares leading up to it about like riding my bike to the foot of the mountain and then just being it blanketed in snow could come true,
For
and
sure.
really you just have to ask for safe passage and act respectively.
Wow. So, no, you said we. Is that the royal we? Is that the voices in your head, or do you have someone that goes with you?
No, yeah, no, that's the voices in my head. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So how do you prove that you did it? Like, do you have a camera with you? Do you, well, like a GoPro type of thing, or?
Yeah, so it depends on the journey. So with my bigger, longer ones, I'll also carry a spot tracker.
Mm.
So I'll record them on my watch, on my bike computer, which, like my bike computer doubles as my navigation when I run. So like I'm using it on my bike to get from here to there, and then I'm taking it off my bike and to run the trail up the mountain and all that. Uh, so it's, I record it on my watch and I carry this spot tracker, which actually kind of makes it really fun, because then people can kind of interact with it and it becomes something that, they become a part of, and which is exactly what I'm looking for, because it's not really any sort of, oh, look at what I've done. It's not like I'm trying to like, there's my Guinness World Record is, I don't know where it is. It's in my basement somewhere. You know what I mean? Like I don't have this stuff like really, I don't have
Yeah.
trophies on the walls really. Like it's not why I do it. It's to share these experiences with people and to like try to make a difference in the world. So when I have the spot tracker on, I'll have some amazing moments where, like on the NE6, this woman whose mother has been affected by Alzheimer's, she bought my book beforehand and like was a big fan of it, and she like met me out on the road with a sign and stuff.
Oh,
So it's like those ways like really really fill my heart with joy, and those are the times that push me further through everything. So it's a little, and I'm doing Instagram stories too, most of the time, because I'm trying to bring awareness to the causes, so you really just got to kind of push out stuff.
and I feel like you're kind of you obviously know, I'm sure you know the story of Roger Bannister, who broke what was it, the 4 minute mile. And then which people thought humans couldn't break until he did. And then after he did, people are like, oh, I guess it can be done. And it was broken many, many, many times and continues to be broken. What you're doing is sort of like that. It's kind of just going, oh, someone could really do that. They could go up and down all those mountains, and they could ride their bike in between, and they could do it, plan to do it in 6 days, but actually do it in around 4. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that's one of the greatest human stories of all time. I think that truly describes us as a species, really, is the whole Roger Bannister story right there. And I love it so much, and I use it as I use it as an analogy all the time because of that. It's like everyone's like, oh, you couldn't do that, you can't do this, and like, you can't with that attitude.
Yeah, that's right. And you do it on plants, which is one of the themes of my podcast, of the work I do, is people think it can't be done. It can't be done happily. It can't be done healthily. I mean, people have all kinds of ideas why it would just be impossible. And I love that you're just doing real impossible things with it. It's so fun. That's so fun. So you've done the NE6, the mountains in New England. You've done your Guinness World Record was going from the tip top of Maine to Key West. Was
Yep.
that it? And
Yeah.
how long did that take?
So it was 2,300 miles from the border of Canada in Madawaska, Maine, down to the 90 miles to Cuba buoy in Key West, and I did it in 11 days and 9.5 hours.
And what was the previous record for that?
They set it as 12 days, so maybe a little more than half a day.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. Were you ever nervous that you weren't going to make it? I mean, you were going to make it, but that you weren't going to break that record.
No, because like I said, like, yeah, there'll be times where I'm like, even I'm like, how am I going to do this? But it doesn't mean I don't believe I still can.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You just have to be like, in that moment, it's a smaller piece of a problem that you have to solve. And just like the overall arching system of belief is there. It's just in those moments you're like, oh, well, I didn't get a flat tire until the very last day. Like, I'm not kidding you. Like,
Is that when it was? The very last day?
And at that point, I had extreme cyclist palsy. So basically, I crushed the ulnar nerve in my hand.
Oh.
So I cut off blood flow to the second part of my hand from riding, 17 to 20 hours a day, for at that point 10 days straight. So I had no use of my silly putty fingers, and I'm like I lost a screw of my wheel doing this. So I'm like physically unable to put it over the tire, and I like lost the screw. And like even in that moment, I was like, this may like mess a lot of stuff up. And I theoretically could have like not made it. You know what I mean? But those are the times where you're like, you really got to fall back on the cool and be like, okay, just remember you can do it if you believe you can do it, and just like solve this problem and then move on to the next one, because I'll never forget when I was riding my bike across the country, and I had a cell phone, I didn't, I used maps, but I had a cell phone. I would like look on Google Maps, and I'm like, oh my God, I have so much more to go, but like, what the key is just like focusing on the next pedal stroke, or the next step, or the next paddle stroke. It's really just trying to bring yourself into that moment, back into the moment to solve the problem. Otherwise you're just so easy to get super overwhelmed by the immense, landscape thrown in front of you.
And such a metaphor for everything in life, right?
Totally.
Yeah. The next step, the next choice, with people who are having trouble with trying to commit to plant-based eating, it's always just one choice at a time, and to not beat yourself up when that choice doesn't work out, to learn from it. Well, how did that happen? What can I do next? How can I, because nothing goes according to plan every single time.
Totally. And I think that's one thing with being a vegan too, is like, I have friends who get like, I have this one friend in particular who he's like, I'm going to do it, man. And he does it. And then he like messes up. And then like, he's like, oh, I couldn't do it. And I'm like, nah, dude, it's just like knowing that like you're going to mess up, like, especially in the beginning. Like, dude, I didn't know pesto had Parmesan cheese until I was left feeling not the besto afterwards, And like,
Yeah.
that's how it all is too, is you're like, oh, it's a big learning process. And I think we're way too, and this is an issue I have personally, but like we strive way too hard for perfection, when like in reality we should just be doing like our relative best to the scenario, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't like, how you expect to learn everything overnight? You're
Yeah.
not, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like I slowly, like even me, like, yeah, it kind of sounds like boom, I went vegan. I was like, yeah, but it's still over kind of like a couple of months. You know what I mean? Like where I was just like, oh, this, no that. Oh, this, no that, you know, and it was just completely just slowly replacing all these things, you know, and then all of a sudden people, you know, someone says to you, they're like, oh, I've never had vegan food before. And you're like, bro, you've been eating it your whole life. It's called an apple. You know, like that's the
Yeah.
thing too, is
Yeah.
we, you know, veganism is not perfection. If anything, I say it's the most natural thing. You know, it's the curved lines, it's not the 90-degree angles, you know, it's the rugged roots and the rapid patterns that flow through the forest. Like eventually you'll figure it out, you know, but you just like in the beginning, you know, it's just learning like, oh, instead of this, you do this. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh man, like now I can train so much harder. You know, I think a lot like more clearly, and you also don't carry all this karmic guilt from ingesting suffering of. I mean, most people eat like a bunch of meat every day. You know, like think about how much suffering and literal death you're consuming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you've felt that relief karmically, energetically, and you've also felt the relief physically in terms of so many people say inflammation, especially someone who is working out like you are at the extreme level of their endurance. Inflammation is usually something you have to have a strategy for.
Oh, totally. And also just like the bioavailability of protein, right?
Mm.
You know, like you say you get like some, you know, hunk of flesh has 70 grams of protein, but like you're not going to get 70 grams of protein from that hunk of flesh, you know? Whereas if you eat 40 grams of protein from tofu or 70 grams of protein from tofu or seitan or tempeh or legumes or, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because we know plants have protein, you're going to get more of it and it's less stress on your body too, you know, because everything's all connected, right? So if you don't have to, your body doesn't have to work so hard to process that protein, it has more time to repair and to recover and flush out that inflammation and everything. It's, you're really just like, it's almost like a cheat code after a while. You're like, oh, I have boundless energy now.
Well, you seem to. It seems to be true in your case. So, and you were just talking about the idea of you don't figure it all out all at once necessarily, and there's a learning curve. And I always say you couldn't do what you do if you never made a mistake, right? In terms of your work, in terms of your athleticism, in terms of your bicycle, your tools, your planning. But the things, you try not to waste the mistakes, right? You try to like learn from them and make a better plan. And this is what we're trying to do at Veg Your Best. And so it's
Yeah.
so cool to have you doing it in a really kind of a metaphorical way that just kind of blows our minds. And your book is called, it's For Those Who Can't.
For those who can't. Yep.
Yeah, tell me about that, because that's really, you're kind of showing us, most of us maybe can but are not going to.
Yeah.
But for
No.
those who can't.
Well, that's the thing too. So like, you know, my athletic journey, like, yeah, I played sports in high school, but then I kind of went off on a bad tangent. I moved to Boston and like started hanging out with felons and blah, 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 you know, and then I got in a really bad motorcycle accident. And then I found my high school mountain bike and I rode that around the block. And then I was like, I wonder if I could ride that a bit further. And then all of a sudden I rode my bike across the country. And that's one thing too, is people need to realize like where they're at. You know, it's like nobody expects you to go from couch to marathon. You know, it's called couch to 5K. Like even in this expression within our society, which makes everything be perfect, it's still couch to 5K. So a 5K for someone else may be a marathon for someone else, you know, and kind of like relevance of where you're at in your own journey, right? Because this is your journey. Like you're not just like jumping in the middle of somebody else's. This is like not how it works. You know, this isn't like you're getting cast onto a different ship to go across the Atlantic. Like, no, this is a process of honestly just like fucking shit up and learning from it every single time over and over.
Mm.
You know, and not really having the ego with it too, you know, like not being so attached to it, you know, and like knowing that we're imperfect, right? Like we're gonna mess up.
Yeah, it is part of it, right? That's part of it. I always say you wouldn't read a book or watch a movie where nothing went wrong. You'd just be like, no,
Yeah.
not for
Yeah.
me. So I think that, and you can choose your own adventure, but you have to choose your own adventure also. We can't choose yours. We can't choose someone else's. We have to choose the thing that works in our wheelhouse, somewhere there. So tell me, and now your book, when did you write that?
Yeah, so I wrote that book right after I got back over the course of, I started right when I got back, but it was over the course of about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, because, I had cyclist palsy. So I wrote the entire book with my thumbs on my iPhone. So I wrote this 200-page book by texting it. I texted this whole book to myself.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm feeling so much self-loathing right now because I've been working on a book for months and months and months, and my thumbs work. my hands are fine. Good for you. Wow.
Well, that's the artist pursuit though, right? You're like, oh, it's not done, it's not done, that's done. And like, that's a lot about like, what we were talking about before is like a date on the calendar. Is sometimes you just gotta be like, yo, this is when I'm going. And that's how I've done all my stuff is like, I'm going this day. And like, you know, uh before the 10K and before the Guinness World Record ride, like the book starts off with a terrible accident I got in a month before I was supposed to leave. So I got hit by a car. I was going 25, they were going 25. So it was like a 50 plus mile per hour collision that collapsed my bike in. I had wicked bad PTSD. I tore my meniscus. I had a crazy concussion. I had whiplash. I had a hell of a bone bruise. Like I had a laundry list of injuries. And, that made me have to push my ride back into the fall of that year. So it starts off with me getting hit by a car, coming back through the whole process, and then doing, that was just to get to the starting line, and like another big thing too is people don't realize like it's just getting to the starting line can be the hardest part. It's like at 200 miles a day isn't easy, but like at that point, like riding the bike was the easy part.
Once you'd taken off, once you were on your way.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was still like unbelievably difficult. Most definitely, sure, like getting attacked by fire ants. And it's once again snow, like it snowed the day I left in Madawaska, but it was 105 in Key West, so it was like it was rapid variability, and all that. So it tells the story of the journey, but it also tells kind of my mental health story, kind of how I've dealt with mental health my whole life. I talk about my friends, and I also talk about some philosophical ideas that kind of like the whole concept of just like believing in yourself, right? I really try to push that we really tell our own stories, and this is me telling my own story and just a little sliver of my life through it.
Well, we are going to put links in the show notes and on Instagram when this airs so people can find your book. But why don't you tell everybody right now where they would look for your book? So it's called For Those Who Can't.
Yeah, for those who can't, the story of the first U.S. North to South record, you can find it on my website, bicyclebrendan.com. Find out a little bit more about me, my speaking page, if you want me to speak at your school, at your bike shop, anything like that's on there. And it's also on Amazon as well. Amazon, and there's even a little Kindle option if you prefer that.
That's great. So for those who can't, and you also on your website, people can book you to speak, but also you do coaching for people who are looking to take on a real adventure.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What kind of coaching is that?
Yeah, so it's pretty much like I call it like adventure consulting,
Mm-hmm.
because when a few years ago, like, obviously 1976, that was the bicentennial ride. That was the first like big ride across the country that started the whole Adventure Cycling Association and that whole movement about like big touring in America. And my whole thing with, adventure consulting is I love playing outside. Like I love riding my bike, whether it's, a fast road bike or my fat bike. Like I love paddling. I love trail running. I just love to be outside. And like I was saying, I'm a student of adventure. So I'm constantly trying to soak it all up because I just find it fascinating as much as I find it fun. So what I do is I help people put together their own first cross country ride, or their, ride around New England, or, get ready for their first ultra marathon, and, just kind of things like that to really like help people make their dream into reality. Because that's we're talking about the starting line. Like, that's really what it is helping people navigate those crazy choppy waters before they even get there. Because otherwise it can really seem like unsurmountable when you look at the entirety of it. But when you break it down, like, you're able to solve these things and get there, and have this amazing experience that's going to help you grow as a person. And it's really just going to make you a better brother, sister, mother, father, partner, etc. when you go on these big journeys.
I think that's such an exciting, in coaching, we call it a niche. That's such an exciting niche to have, adventure, because probably 90% of the people, if not more, talk themselves out of it before the starting line.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big time. And I think, we don't always necessarily have the best circle around us when we start off on these journeys too. Like, I didn't, like, all my friends / colleagues, if you will, like, they were all beer drinking buddies, and like over time, like, I had to like distance myself from a lot of like unnecessary negativity because they weren't really growing in themselves. So, I know I'm not alone in that. And it's the concept of surrounding yourself with good people, and like, I'm like, yeah, dude, that's not like the craziest idea ever. You can totally go hike the Appalachian Trail. Like, why not?
That's that. I think that's just so inspiring to think that there's actually someone who could help you if you've got. So if anybody out there has a dream, at least run it by Brendan. At least run it by him. But be careful; he might talk you. He might talk you into doing
it a little bit. Yeah.
Brendan Walsh, thank you so much for giving us a little glimpse into this kind of adventure lifestyle, and your athleticism and your real devotion to helping people to visualize something a little bit better for themselves. Beautiful. Thank you very much, Brendan.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for what you do.
So, what did you think of Brendan Walsh, a.k.a. Bicycle Brendan, if you're following him on social media? Brendan is always dedicating his adventures to worthy causes, as I think you've heard in the interview. He's always drawing attention to people and issues. His adventures are dedicated, like his book's title, for those who can't. And I know many of us on this vegan and plant-based adventure will resonate with Brendan. And I hope that you'll follow him on Instagram at Bicycle Brendan and encourage him on his next adventure. I know he's working on one right now, but it's not ready for public announcement, and I'm going to bring Brendan back when he's ready to let us all know. And in the meantime, I will be recreating one section of Brendan's Guinness World Record north to south bike trip with a couple of modifications. Instead of starting in Madawaska, Maine on the Canadian border, I'm going to start in suburban New York City, and I'm going to finish about 200 miles north of Brendan's adventure, which went to the tip of Key West. And of course, I'll be in a car and I'll be staying in motels. You know what? We don't compare adventures, do we? Never compare your adventure to anyone else's. What I really loved in my conversation with Brendan is his infectious spirit. Let's allow adventure to infuse whatever undertaking we have in front of us this month. All Brendan's links for social media and how to get his book for those who can't, all of that will be in the show notes. So, have you got an adventure? Is there an adventure? There's somewhere you want to arrive rattling around in your brain? I can't wait to hear about it. Okay, kids. Until next week, veg your best. Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe leave us a 5-star review or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.